Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We're going to continue to let people join as they pop in, but we want to be respectful of your time. I see it's 11:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Suzanne Jones, and I'm the School Safety Coordinator for the Division of Elementary and Secondary Education. And thank you so much for joining us today. We've got Haley Baca with PATH, and she's going to explain a little bit more about that organization and herself when she gets started. And she's going to present for us on human trafficking. This is a topic that I know a lot of educators are very interested in because you see the impact and the implications it's having on your students in the classroom. So just a couple housekeeping things, and then we'll turn it over to Haley. This presentation is going to be recorded, and it will be posted on the division's school safety page. I'll pop that link into the chat in just a minute. The PowerPoint will not be shared, but you can always come back and check the presentation again. You can always come back and watch the recording if you want that information. If you received the link to get in today from anyone other than me or ESC Works, I'm going to need you to send me an email so that I can properly give you credit and get your certificate. If you registered through ESC Works, then your certificate will come through ESC Works. If you registered with me by email, then I'll send you an email certificate. But if you got the link any other way than those two sources, I'll need you to email me, and I'll put my email in the chat in a minute, and we'll get your certificate for attendance today. Also, I'll put in a link to a subscription page to sign up for my mailing list. I'm doing a lot of trainings around human trafficking, cybersecurity, all the different aspects that impact a school's safe environment. And so you're always welcome to sign up for the emailing list, and I'll send out the list of those trainings about once a month. It's usually a monthly email. And also, whenever we do a topic on human trafficking, I always want to point out for our educators that back in 2017, human trafficking was added to the list of recognized child abuse factors. And so any educator who suspects that a child is a victim of trafficking, you are required to report that just like you would any other suspected abuse. And that means calling the Arkansas State Police Child Abuse Hotline, 1-844-SAVE-A-CHILD. That is what the requirement of a mandated reporter is. If you choose to report through the National Human Trafficking Hotline, you certainly can do that as a secondary report. That hotline is set up more dedicated to human trafficking incidents, and so they have a little bit more resources to investigate and to check into that. But please do not bypass that step of reporting to the Arkansas State Police Child Abuse Hotline. So we do have a transcript feature. If you need to turn it on, you should see down at the bottom of your screen, kind of towards the right, you'll see a feature that says CC Live Transcript. You can turn that on and you'll be able to see the transcript features rolling across the screen. If it's on right now and that's bothering you, you can click it again and turn it off. And for the presentation today, we're going to be using the Q&A button. So it again is down there at the bottom. Any questions that you have, feel free to pop them in there, and I'll be answering them and providing them to Haley at the end for her feedback. So without further ado, Haley, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being with us, and we can't wait to hear what you have to share.
Thank you for having me. So as Suzanne said, my name is Haley Baca, and I am with PATH. PATH stands for Partners Against Trafficking Humans. We're located here in North Little Rock, and we provide services to anybody that's been a victim of any type of sex crime, whether that was molestation, a rape that happened 20 years ago, or something that's happening actively in sex trafficking. So we always say if somebody took advantage of them in any sexual manner, then we will work with them. So I will go ahead and get into our presentation. So this slide, as you can see, human trafficking is known as modern day slavery. So essentially what human trafficking is the buying and selling of another human being. And while there is money involved, it does not always have to be the case. It really is the exchange of anything for profit. So when I say that, that means that it could be somebody saying, as long as you live here and I will provide free rent for you, as long as you have sex with me and my friends, that's considered sex trafficking. So there are three main elements to trafficking, which is force, fraud, and coercion. And we'll talk more about that in the next slide. So this is known as the AMP model. This really shows you how trafficking breaks down. So in the action column, you can see it's recruitment, it's transportation, it's providing and obtaining another human being. While recruitment and transportation are a part of the action piece of human trafficking, that does not always have to take place. Someone does not have to physically be transported from one location to another to be classified as a trafficking victim. I think a lot of people get hung up on the term trafficking and think that it means that you have to physically move from one place to another. But again, going back to the scenario that we just talked about, somebody could be trafficked within their own home. It could be their dad or their mom that's pimping them out every night. So they may sit in your classrooms and attend school every day and then get on the bus and get dropped off at their house. But then that night, their parent may be the one that is sexually exploiting them on the internet for money. So trafficking can take place within the home. And then under the means are the three elements that we just talked about. Force is the one that everybody assumes is the biggest way that traffickers recruit their victims, but that's not always the case. I think we all grew up hearing stranger danger. We heard about the white van. But that's not always what it is. It's not taken, and it's not the way Hollywood portrays it to be. So what force really looks like is it does take place in the sex industry. There's a lot of violence in there, a lot of physical violence, but that's not always the biggest recruitment method that traffickers use to recruit their victims. One thing that you need to know about trafficking is it's very relational. So especially here in the States. So it's more likely to be somebody that you do know. Fraud is the second element. And this really plays a big role on social media. This also plays a role with the youth because youth are more susceptible to be easily influenced by the ads that they see on the internet. So fraud can look like a modeling job on Instagram. That sounds way too good to be true. And I always teach the kids, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And then the third element is coercion. This is the one that we see all the time across the board with all of our clients here at PATH. What coercion has the factor that it does is it's the manipulation. It's the mind games. It's the threats. It's telling them that if you loved me, you would actually do this. Coercion can look like somebody saying to the victim, that's fine if you don't want to do this anymore. I'll just go get your little sister to do it. So coercion is really a lot of what plays into why these victims don't leave. And a lot of times people always ask, well, she's not chained, she's not handcuffed, she's not locked up in the basement. Why doesn't she just go? Well, the biggest part of that is because of the fear of the unknown. Coercion is what keeps them there. And we say this all the time, but trafficking really is a trap of the mind. It keeps them there because they're so afraid of what's to come if they were to leave. And then the purpose, there's three main crimes that are under the umbrella of human trafficking, which is labor, sex, and organ trafficking. So I only put this slide up just for a few seconds because I want you guys to know the difference between human smuggling and trafficking. These are used interchangeably a lot, but they are not the same crime. The reason being that this slide is up here is so you can understand when you have educated conversations moving forward about this crime, you know the difference between the two. So human smuggling is going to be a crime against the nation's borders, and it's transportation based. Trafficking, on the other hand, is a crime against a human being, and it's exploitation based. So they're both crimes in and of themselves, but there are overlapping factors for both of them. But you need to know what trafficking really is, because if you're calling something a smuggling case and it's really trafficking, you might be doing a disservice to those victims. So here are some quick stats. I won't read through all of these. You guys can, if you want to, take a picture of the screen, whatever you want to do, but I'm not going to read through all of them. So right now it's estimated that there are 40 million victims worldwide, victims of human trafficking. And again, that 40 million encompasses a lot of different people groups. So this could be somebody that is being bought and sold for sexual acts every single night. This could also be somebody that's working in a sweatshop for no money. This could be somebody that is on a ship in another country out in the ocean trying to get shrimp for that boat. So this can look like a lot of different factors. Right now, it's estimated that there are 800,000 people trafficked annually. And then it is the fastest growing criminal industry, but it's second largest to drug trafficking. The reason being is because you can sell a drug one time and you'll never have it again. You can sell a human being over and over and over every single night and make more profit off of them. This is an unfortunate perspective to look at it, but I do see sex trafficking surpassing drug trafficking if nothing changes in the near future. And then you can see the average age here in the United States is 12 to 14. However, in other countries, it is 7 to 9. I always want to camp out on this stat for a minute. Just because there is an average age in the US does not mean that they are not younger. Our youngest client that we've ever served here at PATH came in when she was 4 years old. But then a few months ago, we received a helpline call from a family member reporting that an 8-month-old baby was being bought and sold in Little Rock. So that just goes to show you, while there is an average age, it happens much younger a lot of the time. And then that last stat I want you guys to make note of, 1 in 3 runaways is likely to be approached by a pimp within 48 hours. So when I go into the schools and when I teach the kids, I always tell them, if home is not good, you need to share that with a safe person. Don't just pick up and run away. It's likely that pimps and perpetrators are going to be out looking for those people that are more vulnerable. So, and I say this all the time, but if somebody's not feeling that love and attention that they need at home, they're going to find it somewhere else, whether that's on the streets or on social media. So here's just some more additional stats. It was reported that 1 in 5 endangered runaways were likely child sex trafficking victims, and 75% of them were in DHS custody at the time. That's huge, because that just shows you how many kids are slipping through the cracks. So they're in the system and still not being recognized as those victims. And then another one on the bottom, once rescued, if the victim has no place to go, they end up back in the hands of the trafficker within 24 hours. This is a really big deal because right now in the state of Arkansas, there are no safe houses specifically for sex trafficking victims. So we work with other resources if we do need immediate shelter for somebody, and we have some of our own immediate safe housing here at PATH, but we do not have a safe house that somebody could live at for months on end. And so this is big. If somebody's arrested and then they go to the police station, they may stay there a couple nights, but the second they're released, they were probably just charged with prostitution charges and put back on the streets. So if they ran away from home, they have nowhere else to go but back to their perpetrator again. So it's super important that we do find them places to go. So everybody always wants to know, how much money does human trafficking really bring in? Well, just to put it into perspective, right now it is making more money than Google, Starbucks, Nike, and the NFL combined. This is huge. If you think about one of those things themselves, they bring in so much money. I'm pretty sure I use Google every single day. I know so many people that frequently go to Starbucks on a daily basis. Think about the NFL. Think about how many people and how much entertainment is brought in just for that one event. And this crime is still bringing in far more money than all of those industries combined. So it is $150 billion a year. And again, it's because you can make so much profit off of one person. So human trafficking, this term really encompasses what it truly is. It is the exploitation of vulnerability. So some examples of someone who may be more vulnerable or more susceptible to becoming a victim of this crime: somebody that has disabilities, youth, culture. Culture is huge. Language barriers are a really big one, because if they don't speak the native language, they may sign documents not knowing what it's for. So they may come over here from Mexico or wherever they were located and come to the States for a job or the promise of a better future. And they get here, and really what they thought they were going to be doing was being a waitress, and they're having to have sex every single night with people that they've never met before for money. So those are big ones. Natural disasters, that's one that takes a lot of people by surprise. Perpetrators love to locate where the natural disaster is, and that's where they hit, because that's when people are going to be more vulnerable. And after you hear this, you'll start to think about it when you see a hurricane or a tornado go through a city on the news, and you start to wonder, where are those kids? So imagine a 7-year-old is in their home. A tornado hits, they can't find their parents. They're not even sure if they're alive. They lost their house, their clothing, their family. They don't know what to do. So they go to their local church or they go to a gas station just to stay safe and warm. And someone approaches them. It may be someone they know, or it could be someone they don't know. But that's when perpetrators are waiting for those prime opportunities to take advantage of somebody that is vulnerable. And especially for kids, if you knew that person and you grew up with them your whole life, you may want to go with them because they're providing you the things you need. But that's when they may take advantage of them. And then drug abuse and addiction, this is big. It can play a role in two different ways. You could have somebody that's never used drugs in their entire life. However, once they start becoming victimized in the sex industry, their perpetrator is now feeding them drugs. So now they're hooked and don't want to leave because they have drugs. Or on the other hand, it could be somebody that already has a drug addiction. So if somebody's already abusing substances or alcohol in any way, a perpetrator or a pimp may see that as an open door and an opportunity to say, as I'll give you the drugs for free. All you have to do is give this person a blowjob. So that is one thing that they will do, is absolutely take advantage of any of those weak spots, any place where they may be vulnerable. So here are 5 common recruitment methods. I won't stay on this slide too long, but I want you guys to see again. Remember, when you're reading these, human trafficking is very relational. So it's likely to be those people that you do know. So it might be your personal social media. I teach the kids all the time the importance of having their accounts on private settings. A lot of the kids like to have it on public. They get more likes, they get more comments. It feels good to have people look at your account whenever they can. But we need to teach kids the importance of having our social media locked down and not just willingly allowing information to go out to people that we don't know. It may be a romantic relationship. So this could be somebody that's saying, no, it's not my pimp, it's just my boyfriend. And one thing you guys need to understand is a lot of times they're not going to self-identify as a victim. So they may not say, I've been sex trafficked. To them, it is just their boyfriend. However, he's doing these things. So that's why education is so important, because if we can look at something and say, no, this is a trafficking situation, they may not even know that. A lot of times people don't self-identify as victims, or they don't report because they had no idea that a crime was ever being done against them. They just thought they were in a relationship. And then online ads and the lure of wealth really play into that fraud factor and that element of human trafficking. And then the 5th one being is current victims. So peer recruitment is the most frequent form of recruitment for the sex industry. And we saw this come out with the Jeffrey Epstein case. This one was a big deal because you have this man who has a lot of wealth and knows a lot of different celebrities. He's promising to kickstart the career for all of these women. So to them, they did not think that they were victims of a crime. So I don't want you guys to read this slide and see it as malicious. It's not always that somebody is just out to hurt their other friend. A lot of times what it is they want to help their friends out. So if somebody is taking care of me very well, he's giving me money, he's taking me on these luxurious trips across the world, I might want to bring my best friends over. So when you see this slide, just understand that it's not always a malicious intent to hurt them. It may be something that they're doing unintentionally. So here are some red flags and warning signs to look out for and make notice of in a victim of human trafficking or sexual abuse. So tattoos and brandings. It is very common for traffickers to tattoo their group of girls or boys and claim them and mark them as their territory. So I teach this to the nurses that if they're starting to see multiple patients come in all with the same tattoo and in the same location, that's definitely something that they should start to be alert to. If they're always avoiding eye contact, pimps will always require that their victims never make eye contact with anybody or the customers. So they are told that they cannot make eye contact with anybody. That's a big one. If they don't have control of their personal ID or documentation, that is a big red flag saying, hey, maybe somebody is being trafficked in this situation. And I won't read through all of these, but as you can see, some other ones are not dressed in weather appropriate clothing. They lack knowledge about the area. If their money is being held by someone else, if they're frequently moving, or they have few or no personal possessions, those are all big warning signs that maybe something is not going on, that something is going on in this situation. And that last one is huge. Anytime it ever says that they owe a debt to someone, or that they have to work to pay off money towards somebody else that they know in their life, that is when we need to ask the important questions and ask them what is going on in the situation. So who are the perpetrators? Well, the perpetrators, they groom others. So they may buy them expensive things. They may take them on nice dates. They tell them that they're the only one. They build them up until that person trusts them. So perpetrators are going to build that relationship with them. They're building that rapport until they feel that they have that girl or boy right where they want her, and they know they would do anything for them. So they may be charming. This is a big one. Ted Bundy, he sexually abused several women, and this was a big part of it, is that he was incredibly charming. So they didn't fear him in any way. But some other signs to look out for perpetrators is if they're wanting to build relationships with children and spend more time with them than adults, if they show extra physical affection toward them, if they always require that they get a hug every time they see this child, that's something to make notice of. If they're seeking alone time with them, where they want to have sleepovers, day trips, camping, babysitting, and they're always so willing to be involved with the kids, maybe we need to take a step back and ask, what is this person's true intentions with their relationship with this child? And then, of course, again, they take advantage of vulnerability. But that big one, who are they? Well, they can be anyone. They can be anyone in or around our area. So I always tell everybody, check your inner circle. I'm not saying at all that you need to be afraid of those people that you have in your life, but know who's there, and be willing to confront something if you feel like something's off. So everybody always wants to know, why Arkansas? Why is human trafficking happening here? Well, a big thing is we have I-40 and I-30. So the interstate allows easy access for perpetrators, one, to get away to a bordering state very quickly if they needed to. But another thing is that traffickers are going to go places where laws are weaker. They're not going to stay in a state very long where the law on human trafficking is very strict. So they're going to flee to those places where it is weaker. So in 2013, there were very few laws on trafficking. So it was changed from a misdemeanor to a felony. But unfortunately, criminals do not care necessarily about the consequences. So the crimes still happen. In 2015, the Safe Harbor Act was put into place. And what this did is really ensure that child victims of human trafficking will not be prosecuted for prostitution. Now, I love this act because this one makes a lot of sense to me. I have my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and I understood that with any crime, you have to prove the elements of that crime. So if somebody committed larceny against you, theft, you're going to have to prove how that happened to you. And if it does not meet all 5 elements of the crime by the legal definition, it may not be listed as larceny. So this is a big deal because, let me get a drink real quick. I got a tickle in my throat. This is a really big deal because what this does is ensures that anybody that is a minor, anybody under the age of 18, cannot be listed as a prostitute. There is no such thing as a child prostitute. And then in 2017, what this did was required mandatory continuing education. The TAP bill is known as Truckers Against Trafficking. This requires that anybody that is trying to get their CDL, their commercial driver's license, or to renew it, they have to take a test on trafficking and pass the questionnaire afterwards before they can get their license. And then the John bill, and John stands for the purchasers of sex trafficking. What the John bill does is ensures that if somebody is transporting a minor from one location to another for the means of sex trafficking, they can be pulled over, have their car impounded, and then they owe a $500 fine to receive it back. That $500 fine right now is going to victim service agencies. We've noticed that this bill has not been used a lot because honestly, law enforcement is out there fighting so many other crimes, and a lot of them don't always know about the John Bill because they are so busy doing so many other things. So we're hoping to go back to legislation soon and revamp this where 50% of that $500 fine will go to victim service agencies, but the other 50% will go to law enforcement as well. So how does this apply to you guys as educators? So here are some stats that we've gathered here at PATH. One thing that we've been implementing for the last 6 to 8 months now is an audience response system. So what I do is when I go into schools, when I go into businesses, I take this audience response system and I ask questions anonymously to students. They answer with a clicker, so they just get to press A, B, C, or D. So here's some that I wanted you guys to see to put stuff in perspective for you. And again, these are all from Arkansas schools. So of students from 3rd to 8th grade, 22% of them stated that someone has done something to them and told them to keep a secret. So that goes to show that there are students in our classrooms that have had something happen to them or their body, and they've been told that they are not allowed to share with anybody. Of the college students we spoke to in the month of March, so this is just last month, 94% of them said that they know someone who has been sexually abused. And when this stat is only for March, but when you look at it on the much bigger scale, this number is still huge. The majority always answers that they know someone who has been abused. And then of students ranging from 9 to 15 years old, 28% of them stated that they felt unsafe at home. I put that last stat in there so you guys can understand that you may be, I don't know why the power just went out, but I'm going to keep going. So of the students ranging from 9 to 15 years old, 28% of them stated that they feel unsafe. This is huge because it goes to show you that kids don't always feel safe at home, and they go to school for their to talk to their teachers. I think the breaker went out or something. I'm not real sure. Sorry about that. It was kind of creepy sitting here in the dark speaking about trafficking. So I'm glad that the lights came back on. So here's some red flags to notice in students. Difficulty recalling events, or they have inconsistent stories. This is a big one. The reason being is because this is what happens when somebody experiences a traumatic experience. So what happens is our body goes into fight or flight mode. When we are experiencing something that is traumatic, our brain is immediately trying to protect us. So we may either fight the situation, we may flee from it, or we may freeze and not do anything else. So this is a big reason why people can't always recall those events. So it's important that when we are interviewing somebody or we're asking them questions, that we engage the senses. We don't ask a linear timeline of a question. We don't say, well, tell me what happened from start to finish. You may have to start with, well, what did you hear? What did you see? What did you feel? If you can engage their senses, then they're able to recall events better than they were if you were to ask them, well, what happened yesterday at 2:40 p.m.? This is why it is so difficult when it goes to court, because it becomes a he said versus she said. The perpetrator may have a flawless story of what happened. Then that victim gets up on the stand and has to testify, and she or he may say one thing on Monday and their story is completely different on Tuesday. That does not necessarily mean that they're lying. That's just their body's response to the trauma that they endured. Another red flag is if they're unable to speak for themselves. So what are their parents doing? Who are the people that pick them up from school? Are they always making sure that they speak for them? Change in behavior. Are they acting out in class? Are they being very loud and disruptive? Or are they isolating themselves? So when you start to see a student is changing in any way, they may have some form of abuse going on at home, whether it's sexual or physical. So just be observant. Don't be so in a rush in class that you don't get to see the behavior of the students in your classroom or on the school bus or wherever it is. Another one is changing clothing. The reason being for this one is because when somebody's experienced sexual abuse, there's this spectrum. So they may fall on one end and be completely shut off from sex at all and don't want anything to do with it. On the other end, they may become hypersexual. So they may act out. They may start wearing more revealing clothing because of a result of what happened to them. or they may start wearing clothing that is much, much bigger than what they actually wear because they feel shame and they want to cover up their body and they don't want anybody to see their skin. So if you have a student that you're starting to see their behaviors change or their clothing change and they're acting unusual for how they usually are, maybe you should ask those important questions. Hey, I've noticed that you've been a little different lately. What's going on? And then, of course, that last one, having items that they could not otherwise afford. That's what perpetrators love to do when they are grooming. They will buy them expensive things and stuff that they could not have otherwise because it makes them feel very good and taken care of. So now that you guys, I know with virtual learning, and us being virtual right now, it goes to show how much we have become such a society that revolves around technology. So here's some safety tips. Always allow and welcome open communication. Make it known to the students that you are there for them to discuss anything with. Be their safe person. Again, they may not feel safe at home. So be that person that says, you can talk to me about anything. And a lot of times students aren't going to talk about stuff because they're afraid of the consequences or they're afraid of getting in trouble. They need to know that they have somebody at school that is their safe person where they can talk to regardless of what happened. Teach them that children, what they post, that people can be anybody they want on the internet. That what they post can't be undone. A lot of times kids don't understand that. They think that just because they deleted it means that it's gone. Well, we all know that as adults, that once something's out there, they have no control over it. And I'm so big about teaching that to the kids, that if they're sending an image, the second that image leaves their phone, they have no control and it is completely out of their hands what happens to it after that. This is a really big deal. There are so many stories of young teenagers finding out that their photos are listed on Pornhub or other porn sites because somebody took that image and uploaded it to a site. So once something goes out, they have no control over it. So here, and I won't read through all of these, but these are just some apps that parents and teachers should know about. One thing that I want you guys to see is the calculator right there in the center one. What that app is on the front, it just looks like a calculator, but really it allows for people, for kids to be viewing whatever they want behind that calculator screen. So on the surface, it looks like it truly is a calculator. So be aware of what social media is on there. I guarantee there are some adults that don't know every single one of these apps. And I bet if I had to put money on it, all the kids know all of these because they are so up to date on what's coming, what new advancements are being made through apps and social media. So another thing that we need to do when we're talking to students is teach them about consent. And this does not have to be about consent necessarily in a sexual relationship. This is consent on anything. So practice this in your classroom. If you want to give somebody a hug or a high five or a fist bump, make sure that everybody knows that they need to have that permission beforehand. And one thing that I always harp on is that dating does not equal consent. So you can have those conversations with students if they're talking about a relationship that they're in and said, yeah, he hugged
Stephen, can you hear me? Hey everyone, this is Suzanne. I'm not certain if it's me that's frozen or if
just
lost
federal
Haley.
Programs where it makes me make sure and put the budget unit, all that stuff in there.
Did we lose Haley, Stephen?
Yeah. The one thing I was doing wrong though, I had to go back. A lot of them, since I'm the superintendent and federal programs coordinator,
Of the number of schools or the number of students this is happening to.
Well, it's virtual meal delivery day. I got to get back.
So
it's Thursday.
Haley, are you back with us?
I am. I don't know what's going on over here.
It's your day to have the technology gremlins, but I think everyone has stuck with us. We didn't see any drop in participants, so I'll let you pick back up where you are. Whenever you're ready.
I'm so sorry. I'm using my. Thank you for hanging in there and being patient. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I don't know how to make it full screen, but I'm just going to go with it where I have it.
We'll make it work.
Okay.
Good information comes in all forms.
I can't even get it to change slides. I'm trying.
I'll finish up the train of thought I was on. One of the questions about actual Arkansas statistics, someone had asked, is this happening in Arkansas and are there any active cases, which I'm sure you could speak to. But I also know you shared one slide that actually had information you gather as you go out and speak to schools. So to our participants, I'm sure at the end of this, Haley will share her contact information, or we can certainly get you in touch with her. This is a presentation that they do have presentations that can be done for your students at your schools. And so we'll make sure you get in touch with her for that type of resource if you want to bring this to your local area.
I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know what's going on. I have my door shut, but I heard all the chaos in the hallway when the lights went out. I'm trying to think of what the last few slides that I had were, just since they aren't coming up right now. Does anybody have any questions right now while we're waiting?
There was one other question, and it's, is there any reason why safe houses are not available for sex trafficking victims? Is this something that our General Assembly could address?
One thing I will say, Path had a safe house several years ago, and it cost thousands of dollars a month to keep it ran because you had to have volunteers. So it's 24/7. So you have to have people on call all the time. So I know financially it was really hard to keep that open. Another thing, we could only service 9 women in the safe house. With the day program that we have now, we can work with that girl that's 4 years old. We can work with families and the siblings that still live at home with their parents. So I think a big reason for it is because sex trafficking, a lot of times those victims are so high acuity that you need staff that's trained to do it. So it's not as easy or as simple as creating a shelter and just creating a house. You need to be able to reach them therapeutically. So they need to have a trauma-informed therapist. There's so many factors that go into it. But in short, I really want to say it comes down to manpower and funding. We need those things to fall into place for us to have the safe houses.
Do you connect victims with other forms of safe houses or places that they can stay if they need that?
Absolutely. So we did education at Bridgeway Hospital not too long ago. And so we let them know that anytime they have a patient that's ready to be discharged, that they can call us, and we have an entire resource directory that we go through. And so it lists anything from domestic abuse to homeless shelters to food, whatever they need. So we can provide those resources still. So we do have that 24/7 helpline number. And even if they're not a sex trafficking victim or a sexual abuse victim, we can still provide the resources. So there are several places, Dorcas House, Potter's Clay in Hot Springs. There's several people that we work with and have a relationship with where we know they can call us and we can call them and work together. Okay, I think I do have it pulling up, possibly. I say that, and then it's not good. Okay, so you know someone needs help. So now what do you do? So goodness, my slides are getting out of hand for me. So one thing when talking to a victim, again, we've talked about this, but understand that they may not self-identify and they may not know that a crime's being committed against them. That's huge. Number two, trust your gut. If something feels off, you may be right about that. So a lot of times I'll hear people say, well, that made me feel weird, but it's not my business. I don't want to get involved. If something feels off, trust that. You may be the 50th person to make that report that day to the local police station, but you thought it was nothing. So if you see something at Walmart, or whatever it is, and you think this isn't right, you see something in your classroom and you just have this gut feeling that something is off, trust that and do something about it. Don't write it off, because you could be saving a life. Be patient with them and don't push them to share more than they're comfortable with. We may have the best intentions of trying to help. We may truly want to be the one that makes a difference in their life, but if they're not ready to share, it is not our job to push them to have that. It is their story, not ours. So it's a little different, because with minors, you do need to report. You are mandated reporters. With an adult, they're allowed to do whatever they want with their story. So all the time, if we get a call from a mom and she's telling us about her 20-year-old daughter that's being raped, if that 20-year-old does not want to report, it's not our job to do so. So, and again, that changes depending on their age. So if they're minors, of course, as a mandated reporter, you do what you're supposed to do. But with adults, we always say it's up to them on what they want to do with it. And there are so many reasons why they may not report. So be willing to be a good listener and trust them, and just be ready to listen when they want to share. And then that last one, when talking to a victim, have empathy, not sympathy. So don't ever say, well, at least it wasn't this bad. The difference between the two is that sympathy is saying, well, I'm sorry that happened, but empathy is meeting them where they are. Empathy is saying, I'm really sorry that happened, and then doing something about it. The easiest example I can give is if somebody says, I'm hungry. And if you say, oh, I'm sorry, then you're just being sympathetic. If somebody says, I'm hungry, and you say, oh, I'm really sorry, but I also have a sandwich that I can give you, you're meeting that person where they are. So be empathetic anytime that you're approaching any survivor of sexual abuse. So what are some things that you can do? Educate others. I think the biggest thing, and why trafficking slips through the cracks in our state, is because we don't know what it is that we're looking for. So take the knowledge that you learned from today, do additional research, and communicate with others what it really is. Be a voice and an advocate for students or those that can't speak up for themselves. If they have disabilities, if they are in the system, whatever it is, all those types of vulnerability that we talked about earlier, if you see that they cannot be an advocate for themselves, maybe you can encourage them and walk alongside them until they have the courage to tell their parents the simplest thing that may have happened. Whatever it is, be willing to be a voice for others. And then some other ways, you can volunteer with PATH and you can donate. There are a myriad of ways to volunteer and get involved here. We have so many amazing volunteers that teach life skills classes. So they teach the girls how to budget, how to finance, how to cook a meal, and not just something that is a frozen dinner that you get at Walmart. So they teach them those basic life skills that they need to reintegrate back into normal everyday society. There are so many things that we take advantage of or take for granted that we just don't even realize that people in this industry don't always have that. If they lived on the streets, they may not know how much toothpaste to put on a toothbrush every day when you brush your teeth. It's those basic things that we would never think twice about, but for them, it means the world of a difference. So you can volunteer, you can teach the life skills classes, you can work the helpline, you can be on the drive team. There's a myriad of ways to get involved. And then again, just some resources. There's National Sexual Assault Hotline, National Human Trafficking Hotline, and then the PATH Helpline, which is 501-301-HELP. Again, that's 24/7 for us. So even if they're not a sexual abuse victim or survivor, you could still call us and we can provide resources. And then, as Suzanne mentioned earlier, follow the guidelines that your state has given you when it comes to reporting. And then that's just our last slide. So you can see our information on the bottom with our website, and then that is our office number that I've also listed. And I know Suzanne was mentioning it just for a second earlier, but if you are an educator and you want us to do presentations to your students, we can do it with any age group. So I've done as young as elementary all the way up to college, and then we do businesses as well, and churches and youth groups. So whatever the group is, we really meet the presentation and meet those kids where they are. So with elementary students, it's not all about sex trafficking, but it's more about safe touch and unsafe touch. What are good boundaries? What is crossing the line? So it's teaching these kids how to stand up for themselves and say, this isn't right, this shouldn't have happened. A lot of times kids aren't going to report things because they don't truly know that it was a problem. So it takes adults knowing that this is not okay for the kids to then understand that this should not have happened. So thank you guys for sticking with me through all the technical difficulties. And then we can just open it up to questions.
If any of you have questions, feel free to pop it in the chat. And Haley, I think you can see the chat as well, but I'll be glad to read them to you, whatever's easiest. I have a question kind of based on what you were talking about. And I was thinking about that young infant that you said y'all had worked with recently. So, and I know you can't go into details, but when I think about an infant that young going through this, in my mind, I think that's got to be a family connection. And so is that infant usually removed from the home? Or, I mean, how do you deal with a child who is possibly going through this, but it may be happening at home, they may be removed, they may not? Can you see a question in there?
Yeah. One thing that we always say when people call our helpline and it is something familial like that, we always say we're not law enforcement. So a lot of times people call us and want us to come kick down the door and rescue this child. We can do an emergency intake, but we've never done one on a minor. Actually, let me take that back. We have picked up, she was 18, so she was an adult. So our role isn't always intervention. It may be providing those resources. So with that 8-month-old, we knew that that was something that PATH could not necessarily address because it was familial still, but we also knew it was far past what PATH does. And so we did provide resources and reported it on. So we do work with several families where the kids have been in and out of the system. I kind of hope I'm answering your question in some form or fashion. But we work with a lot of families. So we have a mom right now that is a single mom of 3 daughters, and the husband was the perpetrator. So, but he's locked away now. So now we're working with the kids and the mom because they've all been survivors of sexual abuse at some way or another. So one thing that we love to do here is working with the family as a whole and doing it through a holistic approach.
Okay. Several people are reminding me that the chat box is disabled, and you're correct. Put your questions in the Q&A and we can see those. But chat is disabled. You should only be able to see what I put in the chat out to y'all. But we do have a question. Let's see. Well, she says, I don't have a question, but I'd love to have you at Mammoth Springs High School. So this is a request for a presentation. I'll make sure you get that contact information and we get y'all in touch with each other. She says, I feel we're in a direct line for trafficking because of Springfield, Missouri and Little Rock, Memphis. And that's that thoroughfare that you were talking about, that highway route.
Right.
Any other questions for Haley? So we've got just a couple minutes left. I'm going to retouch on the things that I mentioned earlier. If you got the link for today in a manner other than through ESC Works email or through my email directly from me, that means I may not know who you are. I would like to be able to count you in our numbers and give you a certificate for attendance. So I just need you to send me an email and say, hey, a friend forwarded me the link and I loved it, and here's my information so I can get you down. And my email address is in the chat if you want to check that out. And for those of you who have found out about this training through a forwarded email, I do have a mailing list that I send out to about once a month. It just outlines some of the trainings that we're doing. We've got one coming up for the child abuse hotline. It's called After the Call. So it's kind of giving you some insight into what happens and what triggers once you make that report. And I think listening to Haley speak, that might be kind of the point where y'all become involved once there's a known offense, rather than, like you said, busting down the doors. You're kind of helping the victims after they've been identified.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, we can do intervention. So if a 20-year-old says, can you come get me? I've driven to Oklahoma before to pick up a survivor because she needed to immediately leave that state. And then we may bring them back and then figure out what's next steps. We've gotten girls before where they said, I just need to get back to my home in a different state. And we have a Flights to Freedom program. So we picked her up, and then within 24 hours, we've never seen her again, but we did return her back to safety. So we have done things like that. But on the other hand, we are more so aftercare and restoration.
Lisa, I think you put in a partial question. I didn't see it all. If you want to try typing the full question again. While we're waiting for the questions to come in, I'm also going to put another link in the chat for y'all. This is just a kind of a survey that I use to help me plan what other trainings you want to hear. So if you don't mind to take a minute when you get a chance and just answer those questions, it helps me understand who the audience is, because my office works with everyone from school counselors to bus drivers to school resource officers to data techs. So our audience can be wide and varied, and I try to meet the needs of everyone. So just give me some feedback on what I can do to provide trainings to support y'all. Lots of accolades, great presentation. They're very glad that you were able to get back on with us and continue.
I was worried about it for a minute.
Last week, it was my power that was going out, and I was afraid as the host that we would lose everybody. So, it's always something.
It happens.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up with, if there's not any other questions. Again, this recording will be posted on the Desi Safe Schools webpage. Give me about 2 weeks to get it turned around and get it put up. And you can find that link in the chat as well, if you want to get to our webpage. And thank you all for attending. We'll give you about 7 minutes back to your day. You can use the bathroom before you get back into the classroom. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate you, and we value all the work that you do in our school.